My name's Scott Rennick. I'm the owner and the publisher of CBJ. You guys know what we do. Love to try to empower and inspire the professionals in this space. I've been working in climbing for about 30 years, and route setting is a big part of our history and our DNA. Our founder, Mount Mike Helt, level 5 route setter when he started this in 2013. I was a route setter commercially in competition back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and we really care about this. Yeah, without further ado, I'll hand this off to Justin and Foxman from Vortex Routesetting. It's really a privilege to work with them. We've been doing these different kinds of webinars and discussions for over 2 years, I think now. And first got acquainted with them CWA Summit several years ago, where they were presenting some of that original data about route setting, workplace compensation, and workplace conditions that is really one of the leading data sources for route setters. And they presented that a couple times at the summit. They don't get paid for that. That's like volunteer and them just like contributing to the community. You can find their data on vortexroutesetting.com. And both of them really committed to the industry. They're on the committees at CWA, Work at Height, and Route Setting. They've been developing the new program, and both of them have managed crews at multiple facility chains, so they really know what it's like to be in your shoes. So I'm going to hand it off to them. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, we also have Nick on the call. Many of you probably know who Nick is, but Nick's been around for definitely longer than I have been. He started in shaping. He's setting climbing all over the place since 2004. Currently, he's the director of setting for the BP gyms. But previously, he's worked as a consultant, a sales rep. He's kind of like dabbled in a lot of things. So we felt like he would be the best expert to kind of talk about this freelance thing. So Nick, thanks for being here. Should we jump in?
Yeah. Like I figure I usually give like a little talk about how we are going to stay solution oriented and not doom spiral into like how terrible everything is. And for the most part, we're able to keep topics pretty positive. This is going to be very solution oriented, but might not be like the rosiest picture because freelancing as a route setter is really difficult. And one of the reasons that we asked Nick to join us is because well, he's a pretty straight shooter, and we knew that we would be able to like have a really meaningful conversation about some of the challenges and then associated solutions potentially with freelancing as a route setter in the US. So the offer still stands of like, if you want to be so sad, the next time I'm in your town, we can grab a beer and feel really sad about how the state of, the US makes freelancing challenging. But right now, we're going to stay focused on the like how we can make it the most possible it can be. So, yeah. Yeah. Diving in. Let's see. Guys, I just lost all of my trains of thoughts. Justin, you got a thing?
So maybe we start with just acknowledging the fact that we're not lawyers or tax experts, right? Like
or insurance experts.
Yeah, we're just like route setters, right? Trying to figure stuff out. So this is just maybe not the best advice as far as that framework goes, but like we're just going to share as much information as we can, and hopefully we can come to some things. So I guess maybe the first question is like, I think about it in two ways. Like the first is maybe you're thinking about deciding to go freelance. Maybe we start there, right? Because then we could get to the point where like, hey, maybe we decided to do that, and we can like go through the if thens afterwards. But I kind of would love the idea of just maybe having both you, Nick, and Fox kind of like jump off. I think you're both in unique positions. Nick, you have done a lot of freelance and are no longer sort of in that role because of your BP kind of position. Fox, you're kind of almost like in the reverse, where you're like just diving into like a freelance thing and trying to figure it out. And I'm in like a hybrid situation where like, yes, I'm doing the Vortex thing with you, Fox, but I also have a primary gig with my director of route setting for Edgeworks. And so one thing I want to name, and maybe Nick, you will do as well, is that like all the things I'm going to say today are like through the lens of me as the Vortex human, not necessarily the me as the Edgeworks director of route setting human.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Like, Definitely an opinionated person, and my opinions are my own, not the resemblance of the balloon project. So, but
And
yeah, I think on your note, I'll kind of hop off. Oh, Foxman, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, kind of throughout this conversation, like, I'm a fairly transparent human. Anybody who knows me knows this. So if anybody has questions about like what I have been learning in this last year of freelancing, I will answer as openly and honestly as I'm able to. So yeah.
Yeah, I think to start this off, I think like I still am doing Justin to like tweak a little thing you said is like I'm still doing some freelance work. I still work for USA Climbing. I will
Mm.
occasionally take on a college job. Um, I think when I started thinking about this conversation, one of the biggest benefits of being in America is we're a capitalist society who drives to the dollar and the almighty dollar, and we represent and push towards it. So I think while it's difficult, I think that I mean personally have benefited and have made a life. Like I have a wife and two kids and a house and cars and kind of lived my life in a way. And that was all built on the grounds of freelance work in a number of different things, as you mentioned, from old shaping to old sales to inspections to kind of like all sorts of things. So I think like Foxman and I were talking about this a few days ago, and I was just like, yeah, I don't see how it works in route setting. And then I kind of had this epiphany yesterday. I'm like, well, like I did it 10 years ago, and 10 years ago, it's vastly different than it is today. So I think that there is a way forward, and I think being in a capitalistic culture is has its benefits and its negatives. Obviously, we've all experiencing, but I think like there is a lot of things that are positive to like if you push hard enough, I think you can make anything work. I think that's like the American dream. So
Yeah, just like to jump onto that, I feel like I've been asked by a few people. I started bopping around a while ago where I was just like this random person that anytime I traveled, I would cold call any gym in the area and be like, hey, can I come guest set? And that's not the world that we live in now for the most part. There's a couple of key things that have changed, but I think that if we as route setters are able to change our practices like in parallel, I think the world is still open, right? Some gyms are never going to bring in outside route setters, just generally. A lot of gyms now are just asking to see if you have insurance, which we'll get into maybe a little bit later. But I think that to your point, Nick, I think that a lot of things are still possible. You just have to be willing to like put in the work and do the research to see what you have to do to make it possible.
yeah, and I think like laying the groundwork. I have experience working in Canada, in Europe, at World Cups and other events, and in talking to those individuals, and even myself, I've done some contract work in Europe, and um, those systems are vastly different. And when you hear about setters, actually, for most of the world, especially in Europe, most of them don't work for a specific company. They work at all of the companies and they're followed around. And it seems really positive. But the key with those environments is that none of them their health insurance, nor their because their health insurance, nor their like liability insurance. The way that liability is looked at in Europe is vastly different than America. There's a lot more personal responsibility taken in Europe than there is. And if you want to research this, you can look at like just the difference in auto belay laws and flooring laws. In Europe, there's a lot of standards that are built, but like they're very loose comparatively to what we expect in the United States. And they're not a very litigious society. And I think like those factors of both health insurance, litigiousness, um, play a role in the fact that like making contract work very possible. I mean, I worked with a setter who worked in the UK, and I'll leave nameless, but was able to make a pretty substantial living just like working gym to gym. And I think that that doesn't necessarily exist. I would be very interested if it does um, in America because of one of the key factors, which I think is health insurance. But again, I still do it. I still am technically a 1099 employee for USA Climbing, and I do side gigs there. I also do commercial clinics where I'll either teach a staff or work with the staff. And I teach comp simulators and set for comp simulators, both in the United States and Europe, working with private teams and even sometimes I have worked with specific individuals who have asked me to set for them. So I think like there is ways to work it. It's just like kind of how. Um, but I'll let you guys like take over from here.
Yeah, it's just, I think you just named insurance a couple of times. So I think it might be worth diving into like the different types of insurance that people may or may not be thinking about. So from my perspective, and I think like Justin, you can jump in a little bit. We've got like the health insurance, the personal health insurance. What happens if you get hurt while working? What happens to your work if you're hurt generally? And then there's also like business insurance, general liability, professional liability, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I guess Nick, can you talk a little bit about just like that health insurance side? We like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you have again, I'll state it because I think I legally have to. I'm not a insurance expert. I don't understand, nor am I a lawyer. I've been involved with lawyers, but I tend to stay away from that as much as possible. Um, Insurance is a gamut, right? We use the word insurance, especially in the climbing industry, very loosely. We talk about our insurers. We talk about workman's comp. Some of you have been involved in workman's comp courses, etc. But the simplicity of it is you essentially have liability or business insurance. You also can have your health care and personal insurance. And then on top of business insurance, it can cover all sorts of things. I own a guidebook publishing company, as an example. I insure the books that we have. I insure a product. I don't insure myself in that business against litigation or injury because I'm not producing. I through some other documentation and words, we can essentially like relieve ourselves from those things. Um, and in climbing, it's a very interesting game. It's like essentially you need to have business insurance. Sometimes you need to have business insurance that covers you as a worker. So like your workman's comp version as a personal person, you can have that singular insurance. And then you can have your additional healthcare. Most businesses kind of divide the line at healthcare. I don't care if someone has healthcare or doesn't, but I care that you're covered on a workman's comp insurance and that you have your own personal liability. So for instance, when I do a job with the University of Minnesota, they want $1 million umbrella policy that if anything I do, so that could be driving a lift into a wall. It could be anything. It could literally be anything. Cutting a rope, driving a lift into a wall, doing severe damage to both the facility. I need an umbrella policy that covers my business against any damages that they may try to possess. So I drive a lift into a wall and I do $100,000 of damage. I'm making stuff up, so bear with me. Without insurance and business insurance, they have to go after me as the individual, and I have to be proven grossly negligent, which most companies don't want to go through that effort. So they want you to have some type of business insurance. So that system is kind of its own thing. As a personal contractor, I think it's really important for this conversation to kind of like assess the dynamics. And if you don't have legal advice, find legal advice, because basically I've met with a lawyer and this is what I was told. I won't communicate it as a lawyer, but I'll communicate it in the way that it was told to me is people that are injured will sue the people with money. The university wants to protect themselves against being sued against something I would do. If I'm at a climbing gym, whether it be Justin, I hope you don't mind, but I'll use Stone Gardens or Edgeworks as an example. I'm using Edgeworks as an example. I sat there I said for a competition, someone gets injured, they end up suing Edgeworks. Well, in that case, they're not going to necessarily sue me, and to prove my liability against it is quite difficult. This is all to say these are the worst case scenarios you can get into. And to like, what level of protection do you have and do you want? Is like, do you want to live your life for the rest of your life and have a house and assets as you gain wealth in climbing and in life? Do you want to like protect those from people that it could not be your fault? For instance, I could be setting with Justin or Foxman, and I could not even turn the hold, and someone was injured because of it, and I'm still named in the case. Whichever one of us has the most money, they will point the direction of like kind of those lawsuits, and they'll go from there. I have yet to hear of a specific route setter being named in an American case. Scott, Justin, Foxman, you can all correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's been, I think route setters have been named as like
The blanket.
causing the problem, but yeah, as a blanket, but no,
Yeah.
like no one has ever called out Nic Oklobzija in the case. But I know, like, for instance, there was a person severely injured via an auto accident, and like hold companies were named, harnesses were named, the auto blade manufacturer, the wall company, like, and the climbing gym. And my point in saying all of this is to like draw it into like, even though it may be a far-fetched thing, it's a very nice thing for me to sleep at night, to like have a layer of protection.
Yeah.
That's
So,
all to yeah.
oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna like kind of jump in just a little bit to simplify a couple of different types of this insurance. So some of what you've been talking about, we've got like the general liability. So you like mentioned driving a lift into the wall. So this was really helpful for me to know going into freelance about just like the different types of insurance I even had to be thinking about. So the general is like, yeah, you crash the lift into the wall and they need to do repairs. Just it covers damages you might do. Professional liability is a little bit stickier, and some route setters may not choose to go that direction. But as you mentioned, route setters as a group are starting to get mentioned, or route setting is starting to get mentioned in cases. And the last thing any of us wants is to get like mentioned by like name. But I've heard of cases where people say like the holds were not good enough for like the grade that I thought I was climbing, therefore I fell and got injured. Now I'm suing. So that professional liability is more advice. Like your professional expertise gets called into question of, were those holds V4 holds? Science doesn't really know what V4 is. So that is your professional like liability, saying that you are like competent at your profession and can either give advice or make recommendations based on that professionalism. My understanding, not an insurance person, but like I've had insurance people talk to me and I'm like, I don't understand. Yeah. And then they like give me information. And then the health insurance side, there's like our private health insurance, but then also like what happens if we get injured? Where does our workman's comp come from if we are not an employee of a gym? And what happens if we can't work? So
yeah. I think that's an incredible point, and I think really important is like, so I think as we talked about earlier, or like the three of us, Justin and Foxman, we talked about essentially like we have a few steps here. You have, are you interested in freelance, and is it your side gig? Side hustles are great. They're super easy. There are steps I can lay out for you of how to do it in the most professional manner to protect yourself. You'll obviously want to consult a professional. But I can lay out kind of what the standard is for those things. And then you have like, no, you're going to dive in full on. And I think like laying out that groundwork is really important. But I think when we're talking about insurance and we're talking about route setting specifically, like the only thing you do is route setting gigs. You have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Preparing for the worst is like, what happens if you get injured? I've had 2 shoulder surgeries. That can happen. You're out for 9 to 12 months, like what is your income in the time that you can't work? And I'm preparing for there's gap insurance you can buy. There's all sorts of things that will like provide you a percentage of your total income for that year. There's a lot of like tools you can use. However, they all come at a cost. Gap insurance to pay you your full amount of your salary, you can find through Geico. And I've been quoted at up to $180 a month. Is like, if I get injured at my job, I can pay this $180 a month. And if I'm injured at my job, they'll pay the full amount of my salary for that given time. So I think like these details are really important, but I think kind of outside of the sum of like, again, having a professional outlook into what types of insurance you can have, and understanding in most cases when you consult an insurance professional, they're going to try to sell you as much as possible. Having understanding, and this is where like having a lawyer who can walk you through the liability side can be very useful. So um, we were talking earlier about business insurance, and that's like long down the road. Of there's a very simple, like America has created this great thing of either LLCs, corporations, etc. All of these businesses are classified as businesses because LLC stands for Limited Liability Corporation, which provides you a layer of liability where someone can sue you and they don't get to breach the corporate veil of your business and take your items. So for instance, I own a house, but I also own Block Strategies LLC. Block Strategies LLC is what gets paid for most of my route setting gigs. If you sue Block Strategies LLC, I can bankrupt and trash Block Strategies with no, you can't come after my house, or my cars, or any of my things. If I am Nic Oklobzija, and Scott, I'll use you in this example this time, you hire me to do a job and I crash a lift into your wall and I injure someone simultaneously, you sue me, you can sue Nic Oklobzija. All of my assets are open to you. So regardless, I think, and one of the most important things I can say on this call is there are a number of entities you can organize as corporations, LLCs, partnerships, a number of them. Look into them. Google is a great tool for this. To organize, you'll need a few things, which Foxman I would like to walk through at some point, of like giving people the basics. But like setting up a business to get paid to is a great way to layer yourself away from liability. And if you're not doing that, the other benefit to that is on the tax side. Again, I'm not a tax professional, but in most states, you can run a loss for 3 years where you pay very little income based off your expenses. So if you're starting out, it basically helps you with the additional expenses you're coming after. So, and what an expense is to the IRS is like, if you're traveling for the event and you keep it very clean, like your mileage, your hours spent, your flight costs, all those things can be expenses. Food, per diems per day, like all that stuff can be written off without a loss. And I think it's a very valuable tool. And I think early on, I was really lucky that I was able to set that up. And now I own a few, both the guidebook publishing company, another business that I have different organizations that do different things that hopefully generate income. So
I kind of want to jump in, and I feel like what we've been talking about is very much sort of like the form your LLC, be a business as its own entity, right? So like Block Strategies, Vortex, these are their own entities that come and do things for various institutions. I think one of the things that I just want to also mention is that you may be doing freelance outside of that world by temporary onboarding, right? Like you could reach out to such and such a gym and say, hey, I want to do some guest setting or some freelance. And they might come in and say, hey, great. We don't take contractors. We don't do the 1099 thing. Like this is the path. And that might be extra steps for their accounting or HR department, but I've worked at a lot of organizations who will just be like, "Yep," even for like interviews and things, they'll just onboard you, and it's easier to be a temporary employee, and that sort of skirts around a lot of the stuff that we've sort of talked about. But at that point, now you're working for that entity, right? Whether it be an Edgeworks, a BP, what insert gym, and so I think there's so these two diverting avenues where if you have the opportunity to kind of like get in with an organization and they have the capacity to bring you on temporarily or at some like infrequent cadence, then awesome.
Well, I
I
think
think we're
that
trying to prepare you for the latter. Sorry, Fox, go for it.
I was just going to say, I think that that in many ways reduces liability for all parties involved if you're able to be a temporary W-2 employee. Um, like the downside is that you get taxes withheld. Also, that's not a downside, which we should also probably talk about the taxes side of things. So I know, guys, this is like the most dry because I think everybody wants to hear like, oh, if you just go freelance, it's going to be super fine and fun. I also so I've been in little tax self business for a while. Before I was a route setter, I was a professional violist and taught music lessons. And I remember the moment that I got the first year of taxes where I owed the government money and they asked for 5 quarters of taxes all at once. And I almost died in line for falafel. Like the panic that hit my heart. So please forgive me if y'all already know this, but I sure didn't when I first started this out, which is if you are working as a W-2 employee, your employer is matching your Medicare and Social Security payments. And so you yourself are paying less taxes because half of it is getting paid by your employer. If you are self-employed, you need to pay that full percentage. So you're paying your income taxes, your full Social Security, your full Medicare, and maybe something else that I'm not even thinking about. Not a tax professional, just a person that has panicked. And so whatever money you are bringing in as a freelance human, self-employed, you need to be stashing like I would say to be safe, 20 to 25% of it because you're going to need to pay it back in taxes. It's not that like you don't have to pay taxes because you're self-employed. You have to pay more because you're self-employed. So just something to put on everybody's radar.
Yeah, I think the 2 points I would add to both Justin, like the Bouldering Project, we onboard a bunch of temporary employees in the right way. We selectively choose typically temporary employees that live in the state that we're operating in. If you live in, for instance, we have no gyms in California. If you live in California, for us to onboard, we then have to pay state tax. So if you're traveling around as a freelancer, it can be difficult depending on where your home address is. While with that said, I think your point about reserving an amount of money, I would strongly suggest 25% is a great place to start. Paying quarterly or paying yearly is dependent on the amount. But if you're in my position as a side hustle, along with a culmination of other side hustles, your tax bracket also plays a role into that. So in some cases, your $250 a day can actually be less than $90 a day after you've paid taxes, insurance, etc., and whatever, and like taking that full scope in. However, in prepping for this call, I did a bunch of research. You can find so many websites that are built out for this type of work because it's very normal. There's one that's like you put your state in. You can Google it for yourselves, but you put your state, your average yearly income if you have W-2, your 1099 income, and it'll project what your amounts are to save. So you can have a projection before you make this decision to jump into. But I think like freelance as a whole, and probably I've jumped down too many rabbit holes of like how to do it, but essentially if you're going to do it as an independent contractor, your first decision point is, am I going to try to be employed by the individual or not? And if you are going to be try to be employed, I do think that with how much the market has grown, for instance, in New York City, you could be employed by 6 gyms right now today. and be working 1 day a week at each one, making a variety. Maybe you're making slightly less at one or versus the other, but maybe they can't all provide full-time work. And then the only thing you have to be concerned with is your own personal health care. And
Can
in
I
other
add
situations,
I was
yes.
just going to add on to that something to be aware of. If you are a W-2 employee of a bunch of different places, the tax withheld from each place is only going to reflect the income from that place. And so you may owe extra taxes at the end of the year. So just something to keep in mind. Like each W-2 employee is only going to withhold as much as they think they should based on what they are paying you. But if you're working for 5 places, you're obviously, hopefully, earning more. So you might owe more taxes.
Yeah. So all of these things play a role of essentially you can be a freelancer in Colorado, in any major, I would say any major market in America. You can be a freelancer as a W-2 employee, probably, uh, especially with the requisite skills and resume. Um, and you can be an independent contractor as 1099. Many of the large gym chains are no longer using independent contractors because, to my knowledge, providing route setting insurance is almost impossible. However, it seems to be possible now, and Foxman and Justin, I'll let you guys jump into this part. It seems to be possible now, but the day rate that I would have to charge to hold that insurance is so astronomical that I price myself out of the market.
Yeah, I mean, I can just jump in because Vortex does have both professional and general liability, and I don't mind sharing that our premium is like it's like $7,000 a year or something like that. And so like that's a not a small amount of money. And so you do the math, you're like, okay, well, how does this make sense? And I do think that there is conversation happening with some other providers that is maybe coming down the pipeline with like a more affordable variant. And I will say we are definitely going to jump onto that, assuming that it has like the same or similar umbrellas. But I think right now there are a lot of let me just say like a lot of people being sued, a lot of gyms being sued, and I think insurance is a little concerned about it. All that like I know here in the Seattle area there was a recent settlement for like $6 million because of an auto belay situation. I don't want to get into the nitty gritties of it. You can Google it for yourself. But what does that mean for an insurance provider? Well, they're gonna jack up premiums. This is something they don't necessarily know a lot about versus like standard OSHA related construction work at height stuff.
Yeah, to add on to that, like when we talk to insurance companies, they are much more comfortable with us providing inspection documentation because that is a pretty standard. Lots of industries have various inspections and they're very familiar with it. But route setting as an industry is not very well understood. And so I I work with the CWA. I am not part of the conversations that they are having, but I know they're doing good work in explaining what route setting is to various insurance carriers to try to like negotiate policies that will work for freelance route setters because insurers are super nervous about things they don't understand and the work that we do is weird, it's not familiar to them, and so they tend to like the first quote I got was for 22,000 a year and I was like that's not gonna work. So we took on this $7,000 policy because we can't do our work without it. So it's a bit of a gamble of like, will we get enough work to pay for the policy and then, eating because I like eating. And we also have heard that there are other options coming down the pipeline.
And I don't want to be super bleak, but like this insurance premium is maybe one piece of the puzzle, right? Like Nick spoke of this in some capacity. Like, let's say there is an issue and the lawyers throw the spaghetti at the wall, and you or your entity is one of those pieces of spaghetti. Like maybe you're accounting for the health insurance, maybe you're accounting for the insurance premiums, maybe you're accounting for whatever gap insurance that's going to keep you safe if you get injured, but are you accounting for like the legal fees if some claim comes down your pipeline and like you got to pay for a lawyer to like get yourself out of it? Um,
But
yeah,
I
America.
think on those terms, I also want to provide the opposite, which I did for years, which is don't do any of this. just make money as yourself because you don't have any. You live in a truck. At the time, I lived in a truck, and just do contract work by yourself because if they sue you, they're going to take your truck. Like, have I think it's like a perspective on what your assets are and what your risks are. And that's what your own personal risks are. Certain people have a much higher risk tolerance than I do. I like to protect myself unequivocally through any issue. And even how I'm contracted through USA Climbing has been a point of contention because I would like a very specific way that it's done. And I think USA Climbing has been significantly better over the last 10 years and how they've progressed as a company, and even just like payments and other things. But you have, I think when we talk about freelance, it's no longer yourself, you're running a business. And I think the question you should ask yourself is, do you want to run a business, which comes with a business is accounts receivable, accounts payable, like what are your expenses? Managing all that stuff takes a bunch of additional time that you need to like equate for and do. But I definitely think it's possible. I think that I don't know, maybe I'm just like a dork that thinks like you can make anything work if you try hard enough.
No,
And I
I
think
was just gonna say I'll jump in and say like this last year I've had time to run Vortex more, where it was much more of a side hustle, and we didn't have nearly enough time. Um, Also, it's been really enjoyable. Also, there's not much money. Um, but it does feel like, yeah, if you put in the work, it's possible. It's just a question of like, what is that work and how do you make it happen? And also, I'm a year in, so who knows? Maybe I'll starve next year. Uh,
yeah.
yeah.
Or maybe you're like on the rise and you're gonna kill it. I mean, it's to be
Yeah.
told. Yeah,
I mean
I
the
think one thing that
amount the sorry,
go
go
for it.
ahead.
I was just gonna say the one thing that I feel like you do need to be good at if you're in the freelance hustle is you got to be good at marketing yourself. You got to plan on like email blasting every single gym within a drivable or flyable range that you're willing to do, and accept that like maybe one in every 10 is going to come back with you with some sort of actionable. You got to cast the wide net and then assume that's like only a couple of fish are coming in.
Yeah.
And I think on that point, it's I think your net analogy is really good. And like most of my money that provided for the family that I was building at the time came from colleges, universities, high schools. I mean, anywhere I could make money that was in climbing. I've set on a galleons at the time wall to make money because they needed someone to inspect it. I've worked for 6 universities at one time. Um, and in those times when I say like working for, I would go to one university in particular that paid me a significant amount of money to be there, but it was, I mean, uh, thousands of dollars day rate, but it was to do climbing wall inspection for them, train their staff on route setting, inspect their top rope belays, and like train their staff. And I had at the time a climbing wall instructor, so I could like provide that level one training. So I would like provide that training on, I think it was like Thursdays would be the first thing I did. On Fridays, it would be a rest day where I would do all the inspection, which included photography and like a whole eval for them of like things they should look out for. And then when they bought the equipment, they would buy it through me, which I would charge a slight markup. I would then later go back and install it. So like there is ways to do this. It's just I don't know if it's just route setting. So
So we're like 15 minutes out from the hour, and we've been talking a lot. Do y'all have questions? This is that dry moment of time where I just wait.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let me clarify. I a question about insurance because we keep or earlier we were going on and on about liability, health, blah blah blah. I've worked a number of 1099 gigs and I've been onboarded as a W-2 for temporary gigs. So does 1099 not qualify you for workers' comp for the company you're working for then?
It depends on the company and their workman's comp. Yeah, so that's a good
Okay.
question to ask. So I've worked for
Okay.
companies where 1099 employees were covered, but it's not a guarantee.
Okay. So
This is
that
actually this Isaac. I want to touch on one thing really quick. So, and I appreciate your question because I think it's one of the most important questions to route setters. USA
yeah.
Climbing provides you it actually does have a workman's comp policy for you as an individual. I have experienced it twice at being injured, dislocating my ankle at youth nationals and hurting my knee in Prague. Both times I was covered. However, and this is important, Isaac, I'm going to pretend for a second you work for the Bouldering Project and you're a Bouldering Project employee. You get hurt at a USA Climbing event. I have no responsibility to you at that event unless I paid you to be there. And that's really important for us to understand because I have a number of setters who have had injuries at other events or outside. And they're like, hey, can I get my shifts covered? And it's like, no, we have, and it's not because I'm rude or we just can't, as like we have to look at the whole company. And
Sure.
you're not protected. So I think that's a really important part to note of like if you were hurt in a USA climbing event, they may cover you through your injury and there is insurance you can provide for yourself to protect your lost wages, but you're not protected by your current employer.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it's just like this conversation was pretty relevant for me, right? Because I'm a part-time W-2 employee for two different companies, but one's a wall builder that I do service contract type work for, right? The Eldo, full disclosure. The other is Uber Grippin, right? The gym chain. So I have these two W-2s, but then I freelance like pretty frequently. And depending on the gym or the school or whatever, it's like, oh, sure, yeah, we'll just 1099 you or we'll W-2 you. And occasionally the conversation of workers' comp has come up in that. But I just, yeah, like, so sometimes is the answer, and I should ask.
You should ask and actually if you can provide it. So I
Right,
would
sure.
suggest you looking into providing yourself an LLC. Again, I'm not a professional, but like I would suggest setting up an LLC if you haven't already. And then in that LLC, look at what a workman's comp policy would be for yourself because you're one individual. Typically, because of there's all sorts of contractors, they're not super expensive. And then you can just add that into a day rate fee is what I
Yeah.
would do. I would estimate how many jobs I did per year at 40, and then I would just break up that fee across those 40 jobs. And if I did 50 jobs, I just made more money. And if I didn't, I would be shitting myself for not paying enough money.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
Yeah, Curtis, we see you.
Hey, try to come off mute there. So, yeah, we've done like a lot of talking about like what freelancing means for like the individual, but like I'm really curious to get your all's thoughts on like does the climbing industry at large like does it need freelancers? Does it need more W-2 folks? Does it need more like what does the climbing industry really need? And how can like route setters that want to get out there can best contribute?
It's a really good question. I think in most of these conversations, like I feel like every month at some point we talk about how we're losing experience. A lot of experienced route setters eventually move out of full-time route setting. And I'm super biased, right? Because this is the life I'm living right now. But I get brought in from time to time to be like a more experienced person to help with a thing. I think having that as a possibility for route setters to, as they're moving out of full-time, you know, grind set mindset, to be able to still contribute to the community with their experience is valuable, whether that is as a temporary employee or 1099. Who's to say? It's definitely not the only way right? But I don't know if there's like a singular answer for what the industry needs. Unfortunately, in the current like society that we have here, the freelance path is difficult, but not impossible. And I think it does benefit us to try, but also that's me being biased because I'm feeling hopeful.
I think from my perspective, um, changes that were made to employment over the last 4 years in states like Washington, Massachusetts, Minnesota. And by the way, I want to be, every time I talked about this to especially a group of people, they've assumed my bias towards the capitalistic ideas of big business. And that's actually not it at all. I would consider myself a socialist in many ways, but with capitalism, I like to understand it and think about it. And I think when you're looking at these things of what the industry needs, it's like, well, what does capitalism need? What is like it? It costs us more money today to run a gym than it ever has before. It costs us more money to build a gym than it ever has before. And when you look at these things and these constraints, there's also been some significant changes, and for the positive, like the Affordable Health Care Act has been a very impactful thing, but has also made it as an employer very difficult to um, employ. So myself, for instance, could have scaled block strategies to a multifaceted facility that had 20 to 40 route centers working for me. And uh, I couldn't do that because of the Affordable Health Care Act. It was impossible for me to employ people and provide them with the health insurance they needed. That's not bad. That's not a shot at the hope, because the Affordable Health Care Act did a ton of great things. There's also a number of other situations that over the last few years, from minimum wage statements to what it costs to be an employee, that I think that contract work would be much more viable. I'll speak for the Bouldering Project when I say I would personally love, we run a big event called Boulder Fest every year at 12 different gyms. I would love to employ people from outside, local talent who set to come work with our teams to do that. I technically can't do that currently because of a number of other situations. And one of the biggest hurdles is this insurance part of like ensuring them both when they're on site and they use my ladder and they fall off, I'm not going to be sued. And I think those little details, that's just a rough example. I think I could see changing over the next 4 years because I think the industry is growing. So I think route setting will become more known. But I think that's a big one.
Yeah, I know one of the things, and like not speaking for the organization, just like speaking as a consultant for the CWA, some of our goals is providing some best practices so that insurance companies understand that, like, if you are a route setter with X, Y, Z certifications, you can be expected to adhere to X, Y, Z best practices so that any number of companies like BP or Edgeworks or whoever understands who they're hiring when they hire you. So hopefully that makes the landscape a little bit easier for both hiring contractors and for individuals getting insurance is at least my hope. And again, I don't know. I'm not in those insurance conversations, but we are trying to write things that are meaningful and helpful to everybody in the industry.
Well, I think just like anything, like I don't know a ton of route setters who are running consultancies that have these insurances, right? But like if that pool grows, then those premiums go down because that's how insurance typically works, right? And again, not an insurance expert, but it's just you've got 50 people in the funnel, then maybe it's a little bit less expensive for those 50 people versus like there's one or two who have to like cover the whole thing.
Just a couple minutes left. Any other big like questions that we can answer in 4 minutes? We'll solve everything, guys.
If that would be like if we're all under the same provider, yeah, Justin.
No, No, that's actually like I think the providers use these algorithms and people that correlate how many people are in the thing. So car insurance is paid by the cumulative total of people. Yes,
Okay,
it
right.
is affected. Yes, it is affected by the individual program if you're on State Farm, etc. But the more people doing this work and seeking out insurance, the more it's provided by other people to provide a competitive wage. So, like,
Okay.
people will drive down premiums based on the total number of people activating in the space.
Noted.
What else you got? Any other questions?
I think we solved it.
There were some questions from the original chat. I think I could cover in 3 minutes.
Let's
Uh,
go.
I just
I
have
think the
to
most
pull it up.
pressing one is your haircut, the one that you
The
have never
haircut.
had but wanted to try. That seems like the most important one to me.
I was, speaking of side hustles, I did some hair modeling for a period of time and it paid significantly greater than any route setting job I've ever done. And I've had all of the haircuts and I don't want to do that ever again. Um, can
And
you do
so
this outside of comp setting? Yes. Actually, colleges, high schools, significantly better for
mun-
gig work.
municipal walls too.
Municipal walls, yep, are all great. I mean, I've did a contract in the city for the city of Chicago that paid quite well. Um,
Gear to go freelance. I know CBJ has a couple of articles about gear that route setters should own. It depends on, what type of route setting you're looking to do. But your employer may not let you use your employment equipment outside of work. So having your own kit is a good idea.
with 1 minute left, I think that's an important note that I want to address with this crowd and hopefully the future route setting group is when you are a 1099 contractor, there is a way that an employer can take advantage of you as a contractor. I strongly, strongly suggest, and I've used this in my career, unfortunately, a multitude of times. Know what there's a website that the IRS provides of what a freelance independent contractor is and what a W 2 employee is. If they provide you with tools such as ropes, harnesses, etc., drills, all those things, you are not an independent contractor. You are an employee and they're taking advantage of you.
Yeah, that point of like who's paying taxes is important for this. So as a
Yes.
1099 employee, you are paying that half of Medicare and Social Security, whereas if you are an employee, your employer pays that. And so there are instances of employers taking advantage of contractors to not pay what they should be paying in employment taxes. Yeah.
I worked for a company that did that once, but I won't name them.
Yeah.
Yeah, prob's best not to.
Yeah.
Long
So
time
like
ago.
there's a lot of questions in from the chat that we're talking about what's an expected salary. Um, I think if you're trying to decide whether to do this and you want to go out on your own, you need to save some money for running operating expenses. Uh, what I did at the first year is decided how many jobs I was going to do with based off the USA climbing work I had, plus clinics and other things I was teaching. I then took that total and I saved 30% of that money and invested it into the LLC as seed money to start the account, run my expenses, do all sorts of stuff. And in that process, I came up with a total. I think the first year of Block Strategies, I made something like $23,000. That $23,000 was total. That was not after expenses. So I think like my take home that year was not very good, but I was able to write off things like purchasing the drill and doing all sorts of other things. And it grew. It grew to like enough. It was never, I never made a substantial amount of money doing it, but I mean, I've since been able to continue doing that work. And I would say on a yearly average, probably making $10 to $25,000 a year just route setting and teaching USA climbing clinics and doing side hustle work as a freelancer. And that's like now, like I would say mostly income. Very little of that is expense.
Yeah. Guys, I think this was simultaneously one of our most productive and driest conversations. I don't think I've ever talked this much about
So boring.
insurance.
So boring.
Insurance, and it's so important though, because like we want to think about like freelance is like exciting. Like I am so excited about how much I get to travel and also the amount of paperwork and how much I think about like liability.
Yeah.
Like it should be on everybody's mind. So
I just want like if you ever work with me at an event or in person, I want you to know that like when we're talking about the bubble wrap or the fiberglass hole, the fictile that needs to turn like 2 degrees by one screw hole because the move's going to be perfect if we do that. I'm also thinking about how much time I'm spending having this conversation and whether like I'm getting paid enough for this conversation because I like factor in all of those realities into being like, this is a waste of my time. Just turn the hold and it doesn't matter. It's going to be fine.
noted. I'll feel more insecure at the next event. That'll be good.
Great. That's great.
Cool. All right, y'all. I think we did it.
Thanks everybody for being here again. It's nice to have some folks in the room and asking questions. Nick, for sharing your expertise, and yeah, man, you've done a lot of this. Justin Foxman for organizing it. We got the next one coming up December 9. Noel's going to talk about setting for paraclimbers. Hopefully we'll see a bunch of you guys, folks again, and yeah, have a good night. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.
Thank you.